and now we'll meet another sonic architect. A little like M, she's searching for silence to compensate. Her favorite activity is scuba diving because no one can talk to her when she's underwater. It's just the sound of her own breathing and the beauty of the marine life around. Barak Neil Boya is a multidisciplinary artist and software developer currently living in Berlin. She has a formal background in classical music and musicology, and a decades-long career in academia and software development. I started to read her articles and I just had to stop because it was too interesting and I didn't have the time. Highly recommended. Barak brings a multidisciplinary approach to everything she does, and as an audio systems designer, she aims to become a bridge between audio artists, programmers, and the rest of the creative and directional teams, while designing, documenting, and implementing systems that use the technical sound design processes. Some of Barak's previous clients include Apple, Oak International Academy, Soundminder Inc., and many more. And right now, she's working on Morning Musings on the Breath, an autobiographical, audio reactive work that uses Unreal Engine 5, while also creating online education content for game audio. In her talk today, she will be with us via live stream from Berlin, sharing some parts of her process in mapping symbols, an introduction to designing game audio systems. So please give Barak Neil Boya a very warm welcome.
Hello, everybody. I cannot exactly hear or see the audience, and I have a bit of a relay, so I'm just gonna go with intuition. Really happy to be here. Wish I could be there in person. Would like to thank Sarah for her great introduction for me. So in this presentation talk, I am going to try to walk you through my process as an audio systems designer. So a little bit more about me after Sarah's beautiful introduction. So I had too many careers, so I'm not going to go one by one, but basically I've done everything, almost everything related to audio at one time or another, because I've been in this profession since I was 8 years old. I started my education really young in music, and then I branched out to every single thing that you can think of, musicology and computer music and teaching music, and then game audio about 10 years ago. And I have been in and out of the industry depending on what kind of projects I'm working on, but now I've been almost full-time working on it again for the last 2 years, and accumulated quite a bit of new knowledge and a sort of new perspective that I would like to share today. I will try to leave as much time as possible in the end for questions, but in case you have any questions that you cannot ask today, maybe you're watching the stream later, one can hope, you can always reach out to me on the contact form on my website that I will share again after the presentation. So enough about me. Let's talk about game audio. So in this presentation, I wrote everything everywhere all at once because it is also how my brain works. And we are going to go in and out of different items on this list. It's not going to be like a number one, a short history, and number two, implementation. So I hope everyone can follow easily. But again, please write down your questions and ask me later. To begin with, interactive game audio already has a long-ish history because we are actually getting old. I have been playing video games since the late 1980s, which is now ancient times. So the things I'm going to talk about today is hopefully going to be a continuation of this already decades-long tradition and not something entirely brand new. And first, I would like to acknowledge that with a short video. So one of the first very prominent examples of interactivity in music and game audio, of course, is Space Invaders. where the closer the enemies are coming towards you, the music becomes faster while repeating the same pattern. And this approach is still used widely in a lot of games. In Goner from 2016 is one of my favorite examples on this, where the more multiplier you accumulate, the more layers of music you hear, the more intense it gets alongside the visuals. And also it becomes a tiny bit faster just to let you know that it is getting faster, but without actually breaking the immersion. And of course, then there's Peggle, which has now, when we look forward to, my God, 16 years ago, is basically implicating the hits, the accumulation of scores with the pitch ascending, with the staying in the same key, but basically going through the scale. And of course, probably every game audio person's favorite audio implementation in the last decade, Ape Out. So, how can we take things further? And here, first, I think we need to go back to basics. And I would like to apologize in advance to Stefan Mallarmé and then the composers I'm about to talk about for calling them basic. But to just share one very small quote that I think really emphasizes some of the things that I'm talking about today is this single line from the symbolist poet, the 19th century French poet Stefan Mallarmé, on a letter to his friend, to depict not the thing, but the effect it produces. I find this line very, very important for the job that I do, for my work, artistic and creative work. And I hope I will be able to explain it to you why by the end of this talk. So when we talk about symbolism, in 1891, again, this is ancient history, of course. Stefan Mallarmé defines symbolism as to name an object is to suppress 3/4 of the delight of the poem. And without reading the whole thing, but this part is, I feel, very important. It is the perfect use of this mystery that constitutes the symbol to evoke an object gradually in order to reveal a state of the soul. The gradually here is actually the keyword that we should tune into as audio people, because audio in general and sound design, music, everything we do and create is temporal. It opens up, extends and contracts and builds up or falls apart gradually in time. This could be an advantage and also a disadvantage, depending on our audience. Because if someone doesn't have the patience or the time to experience the totality of your work, then there's a good chance that they are going to miss out on some very important parts of your work. So this gradual revelation of things in time is, I think, one of the most important parts of what ties us to impressionists and symbolists and that fin de siècle, important French and other composers and artists in general, and how we can learn from them. So why am I talking about specifically this Stefan Mallarmé guy? Because a little composer that you might have heard of, named Claude Debussy, wrote this at the turn of the century, which was one of the most important classical music works at the time for the 20th century music, not actually at the time of its, not just actually for the time of its creation. So the instrument we just heard was the flute. And some of the things that I am going to say or explain today might sound, again, basic to you, but I always come from the assumption that my audience doesn't always have the same knowledge or the esoteric information that I have. So I always try to include as much information as possible. So why does this flute matter to us, this melody matter to us? Because the name of this piece, which is based on a poem by Stefan Mallarmé, is Prelude to the Afternoon of a Faun. And as some of you might know, a faun's main instrument in Greek mythology is a flute, faun flute. So this piece of classical music is important to us because in here, not only Debussy is doing something that has been done before, which is using an instrument to symbolize a character or a theme, but also he does it in such a way where the theme of this section is engulfed in chromaticism and uses a tritone interval, which is, as we all know by now, it's the devil's interval, because the piece itself, the poem itself, is actually what is considered at the time a very sensual and very scandalous piece, where a faun is just enjoying himself and calling out the nymphs. So in here, what we should pay attention to is how Debussy not only uses a flute to signify the thing itself, but also the intervals, the different opportunities a music composition gives to him, the orchestration, the variations throughout this piece, that 14 or so minutes of music that never stops, the breaking of form, the breaking of almost stretching the tonality by staying on the chromatic side of things from time to time. Basically merging these two things, he is also able to touch what effect it does, the sensuality, the call to the nymphs, the enjoyment of oneself in an afternoon instead of, something else. Why am I talking about Debussy all of a sudden in this presentation? Well, I am not the only person who cares about these composers, of course, because if you pay attention, there is so much that we can take from them and use it in our work. As by now, I'm sure most of you have played, Untitled Goose Game does. So this brilliant implementation actually is where I want to go next. Yes, Debussy wrote preludes and they were performed again and they were cut in stems. But the important point is how they were fed into the systems that was designed to reflect the interactivity, to the user experience to what our audience experiences. So that is the most important advantage that we have as game audio people, not just composers, not just sound designers, but all of us as game audio designers, game audio creatives. We have this advantage that we can touch and manipulate the audience experience during their experience by setting up systems and structures in advance that are modular, responsive, and adaptable. So we can not only take a note from the history and use many, many concepts that we come across or we study, but we should also be thinking about how we can enhance these and use it on our work. So, in my own words, to depict not only the thing, but also the effect it produces should be important to us. Because we are not Stefan Mallarmé who's living a poet's life. We are making games that reach out and connect with a lot of people who live today, who experienced the last century of media, whether it's movies or video games or everything else. And they have cultural or otherwise associations and connotations. So when we create the most basic footstep implementation, we cannot hope to just use a slinky sound effect and make it work. We still need our footsteps to sound like footsteps and the material that it connects with and the heel or toe or whatever else kind of movement we are doing. But that shouldn't be the only thing we are depicting. These footsteps can be tied to a mood the character has, a storyline that the character is going through, that a plot twist that just happened. Maybe our character is sad, so they are now walking slower. And we need to be able to make systems that are adaptive enough that we can actually create this interactivity. And I believe we have the tools for that right now. So we should take advantage of this. In the rest of my presentation, I will be talking about collaboration a lot because we are playing a team sport. No game audio person stands on, just by themselves. So it is very important to know how we can communicate and talk with other people in other creative branches that we are collaborating with. So I'm going to start with the narrative and writing and then go on to the other branches. So first of all, what we can use, what we can leverage, always talk with your writers, always, always, always. So this one thing that I'm going to emphasize throughout this talk, and whoever makes the mistake of coming to me for advice, please be proactive. As audio people, we know better than most other people when we are needed, when we should be integrated into the rest of the game development process. Because most often than not, and I also put the blame on us for that, we are more aware of the dangers of leaving the audio as an afterthought, as a we can do it later. We don't need it right now. You usually will know when to step in. Trust yourself, but to know that knowledge, you have to be in sync with the rest of your team. You have to keep in touch. You have to be proactive, because maybe a few writers, but not the majority of writers are one day just going to, write a new character or someone else and come to you and be like, hey, do you want to chat about how we can give a musical identity or like an oral footprint to this character? So you have to be proactive. You have to ask if you are not sure about something that you just read, if you're not sure that what you just read should be presented on the screen or as an audio cue, etc. Always ask questions, always be proactive, always try to keep up to date with what your team is working on as an audio person, even if they say, now, we're not working on anything that you would be interested right now, because you know better. We know better. Trust yourself. Trust your skill. So a short list of keywords to pay attention to during a first read aka spotting, which is of course not my term, a term I borrowed from film music and film sound design. One thing is numbers, very basic. If there are any numbers that are prominent in the script that you're reading, or in the, few like a narrative beats that you're reading, you can map them. You can map them to, and again, as an audio systems designer, I do not just think in music, or I do not just think in sound design. So the things I'm talking about could be sound effects, ambient sound, and I'm going to give some concrete examples about this in a bit, or musical themes. Because I'm assuming if you're an audio designer, like an audio systems designer, as I like to call myself, or an audio director or a creative director, that kind of person, you are working with other composers, other sound designers, other audio professionals as well. So you can also raise up these ideas. It is important to give concrete examples of what we can map, which symbols we can use. And there is a lot we can borrow from other disciplines to make sure we are creating a cohesive whole. So the numbers, you can always create musical themes that have a certain amount of measure that reflect those numbers, or you can have a set tempo, or you can use these numbers or pitch or interval information. If there's a save which has a password like 357, you can use this as interval information for, maybe that is the sound the safe makes, maybe that is the sound, the notification of a message that is coming to you about the safe makes. So try to see how you can use a number. Same with names. Names or overarching themes like love, or hate, or relationships, like personal or interpersonal relationships. You can use musical cryptograms. You can use musical mirroring. You can use tone rows. You can use tone row reversals. And I'm aware that some of these concepts that I'm talking about, because I'm a musicologist, might not be super clear, but I will unfortunately not have the time to explain all of them. But I'm going to try to explain some of them. And the rest, I'm hoping you might Google, although Google also is terrible about giving correct resources these days. Just don't read anything that is written by AI and you will be good. And I'm also happy to recommend any resources to you about this as a certified musicologist. But yeah, let's talk about like names and relationships. You can, let's say, about personal relationships, about the love relationship, that you can create a musical theme, or a musical, like a sound effect that has a key or has a certain amount of tones, and then you can mirror them. You can basically change. Mirroring is a hard concept to explain with my hands, but basically you can turn the intervals upside down on their head and create a new sound like this for someone who's related to this character, or someone who is important for the game in that moment in time. And same with musical palindromes. So I'm gonna quickly go to my first example, which is musical cryptograms. And yes, that is Bach. So musical cryptograms are, again, nothing new. Basically, Johann Sebastian Bach and my other example here, Dmitri Shostakovich, are known to use the note names, either the solmization, what is called a solmization, or letters, to ingrain their own names, to put their own names as small ciphers almost into their musical works. Of course, some of the most important pieces of music in history are good examples of this. Same with many other composers. So how we can use this? I made one small example, which I am hoping to be able to show in Unreal Engine. So let's say we have a game and we have a character named Andras. Again, all of this, no offense is ever intended during this whole presentation. These are all made up things. And this Andras is maybe a bad guy or some prominent character that we have in the game. And we would like to foreshadow his entrance to the scene, his entrance to the game, or maybe he has some other kind of importance. So we can check if we can use this as a cryptogram. And we can see that we can use the A, and then D, and then E flat is actually that S in German notation, which is also what Shostakovich and Bach used. So, and the numbers under them are the MIDI note informations in case you want to use an oscillator to generate some kind of noise. You can actually map those MIDI notes to note information, speaking about Unreal Engine here. But I did something slightly different, which I am hoping to share right now and hope the new screen share will go without any problems. So we are in Unreal Engine, and I cannot check the chat right now, but I'm just going to hope that the audio will be just fine. So, and of course, you can let me know. I'm hoping if the audio doesn't work. So, right now, what we are seeing is a church bell patch in Unreal Engine 5. And all of my examples today, I was hoping to do my examples in various engines even, because I'm known to suffer greatly from scope creep, but I ended up just doing all of them in Unreal Engine because I was just using it and it was too easy not to do that. So this is a meta sound, and again, I'm gonna explain everything as much as possible. This is a meta sound that has a church bell sample in it. That has one single church bell in it. Let's try to hear this. Cool. So what we can do with this is, and this is the finished version of the system, of course. I hope, I wish that I could just live code it for you, but I don't trust technology that much. So what happens here is we have this single church bell, which is tuned like which the pitch is E, as you can see on the file name. So we said we have the letters A and D, the notes A, D, and E flat. So I can imagine our main character, or, like our camera, anything else, enters a new city, enters a new town, and we hear church bells, but they are actually spelling this guy's name, as a cipher. Because, I don't know, that's what our narrative team said to us. That's what the script we just read says. We hear the script says there's a church, there's a bad guy, and you think, I can actually make these church bells sound like the guy's name. Now, again, this is important. Not everything we are doing has to be immediately transparent, has to be immediately known or acknowledged, or, basically perceived by the audience. It is okay to build things in time. It is okay to put, cues or little like Easter eggs like this. People usually will figure it out in time. And you should never, in my opinion, you should never try to do something smart just to show you're smart. But also, it is important to tie different elements of our game together, because this will enable you to become a better collaborator. This will enable you to show, for example, the screenwriters, the narrative writers you're working with are gonna have their minds blown if you tell them, oh, you know what? I can actually make a cryptogram out of that, and we can use it again afterwards. And so now we have a church bell and we have this system. So also to quickly show the patch I built on play, when we press on play, or when you from the blueprints send on play, we have a trigger repeat, which right now repeats for the period of 2 seconds. And we have a counter. I'm going to explain why in a second. And which is going to an envelope, an ADSR envelope. I'm hoping this is big enough on the screen, which is my pet peeve on these type of streams. And from the envelope, we are also triggering our wave player, which has the single church bell. And we are also multiplying these audio signals, the ADSR signal, the ADSR envelope out and the mono output, and sending it to a mixer. Now, what is happening on the side is a pitch shift. So again, Unreal Engine luckily gives us some cues. The pitch shift is to use for wave acid and semitones. This is important information. So we have an E. We said we're going to have an A, a D, and an E flat. So what we can do is we can have a bell that rings 3 times, which is why we need the counter. We need to count until 3 when we press play. And from that 3, we can basically subtract 1, which is because one of the worst parts in programming is all arrays start from the 0th index. So you have to start from the index 0, which means you will pick the index 0 value for your array. So right now, yes, all 3 of them are 0 because this is our neutral bell to demonstrate what it sounds like when we don't make any adjustments to the pitch. And then we send this float value from this array that we just picked to a trigger route, because in here, we can actually choose on runtime during the game itself even what the bell means. So if it's 0, it's neutral. If it's 1, it is a cryptogram of the name. And 2, I just did this for the fun of it. Honestly, it's not like it's just random pitches to just showcase. And again, it just takes random values from the array. And then we send this pitch value to the pitch shift. So now, hoping nobody will go deaf, everybody protect your ears. Yeah, this is our bell going neutral. And the best thing about parameterizing these values, even when you're prototyping these systems, you can change them right now. For example, maybe I want this bell to go like ring faster. Or slower. Really let that reverb ring out. So now we're going to keep this around 2. And now let's try how it sounds when we switch to our cryptogram. Nothing mind-blowing, but good for prototyping. So you can see the first value is -5 semitones. So basically, it is doing an E to A. The second is 0, which is an E, what we need, because I'm doing not A, D, E flat, I'm doing A, E, D. Again, these are all, another thing I have to emphasize all the time, these are all arbitrary things. Video games are made up. All these values are also made up. So if something doesn't sound right, if something doesn't sound in key with the rest of your environment, also please tune it. Like, you don't have to insist on one value if it doesn't work. And the last one is -2, which is D. And we can also check out the random one just for funsies. Guess I said funsies. And this is a random. Just takes anything out of these random values. So we are very happy. We just showed the rest of the team. We are very smart. We just did all of these things. But we are working in video games. So the next day, our writing team comes to us and they're like, you know what? We are scrapping that church tower and everything else there because it's going to cost us a lot of time and a lot of work. And, we're just not doing that. The church is gone. And you're like, well, at least thank you for telling it to me as an audio person. So, but this is where designing adaptable and modular audio systems comes handy. Because what we can do now instead of this church bell, we can just drag and drop a sample. And all of a sudden, we're saying, you know what? We can actually turn this guy's foreshadowing into a ringtone or an arcade machine or any other sound that you can use. That these pitch information that you just created is adaptable to any other sound that you want to use. Or maybe you just want to do procedural sound design with the oscillators in Unreal Engine or any other type of creation that you have. You can use this structure that you just created. And this is why thinking in systems, thinking in audio systems will always help you in the long term, aside from showing that you're smart. So let's go back to the presentation, which I'm also hoping to be smart enough for Zoom. Okay. So what's next? Visual design. By visual design, I mean anything that has to do with it. Concept art, environment art, character art, everything, all kinds of art, everything visual, UI, anything you can think about goes into this. What can we use? What can we leverage? And again, important notes. Stay up to date with your art department. Be proactive. Again, read, analyze, progresses they share. If you don't have the language for it, still ask questions. I bet you, like, more often than not, people are happy to talk about their process. I mean, we're all artists. We love to talk about how good we are at what we do. Okay, just everybody is like this. So trust it. People love it. Just go, oh my God, I love your work. Can you tell me what this actually means? Like, does this mean anything important? Who's your inspiration, etc. It will help you, because what can happen? You can ask a concept artist, hey, this is really cool. Where, like, how come you came up with this? And then they might tell you, oh, I actually really love this game or this reference or this artist. Then you might actually tie into that reference by going to that movie or going to that game and listen to it and see who composed the music for it, who did the sound design for it. It is important to create and have a cohesive experience, because the work of art that we are creating is a cohesive experience. It is important. So what can we use what should we pay attention to when we take a first look at a piece of concept art? Anything. Symbols, logos, murals, graffiti, anything. You can actually map logos and any other kind of symbols to pitch information, to interval information, again, to musical cryptograms. Any type of items or tools, if they have any similarity temporally, or if they have, like, for example, there might be differences in a level of detail based on your character's point of view, or maybe the audience has a different point of view. So the colors, structural information. And by that, I mean, if there's a building that has a certain type of structure that does not lie within the norms, it is different. You can try to map the height of this building, the different geometric shapes in it, etc., to musical cues or sound effect, maybe an envelope, anything, a wavetable, even. Again, mirroring. So let's say on your next game dev project, your environment art lead is Hieronymus Bosch, as it happens. And here he is in his very important work, An Angel Leading a Soul into Hell, otherwise known as every game audio tutorial that promises you to get you into the game audio industry. So I'm not bitter. I'm sure you're not as well. So we take a look at this piece of art and we see there is a lot of reds, a lot of oranges, a lot of golds, aside from the theme. Let's leave the theme for a second. Theme is easy. Yes, there's a hell, there's Satan, we're seeing it. Oh, I've just been let know that I'm running out of time. Okay, well, I'm not even halfway through my presentation, so too bad for you. But yeah, in here, I'm talking, what this says, chromesthesia, is a type of synesthesia, which is, as some of you might know, is basically when one sense affects another sense's reception of that sensory input. So in chromesthesia's case, it is seeing colors when you hear a sound, or vice versa. So what we can do is, if we have this very red environment, we can actually try to see if we can create a map of the color red in our tonal structure. And this doesn't just have to be, oh, the key of my new level music. This can also be, we can pitch and we can tune our environment sounds, our ambience, our mood. Everything has a key. Like even the most complex sounds has a tonal quality, a timbral quality into it, aside from pure sine waves, etc., who are also, again, will have pitch information in it. It is important to be attuned to how things sound. So, meet your fighters. The Russian composer Alexander Scriabin and the French composer Olivier Messiaen are two people that I picked for this that had chromesthesia related, synesthesia related charts they did for their own work. In Scriabin's case, which what I chose because it was easier to do, as you can see, the color to note equivalence, which is from his work Clavier Lumière, which you can listen, I highly recommend, and also his, I think his tone poem, Prometheus. And here's Olivier Messiaen, who also talked to the birds and had great birdsong compositions. And here is his modes of inversion, which mapped colors to whole modes. Like the second mode here, for example, is golden brown. I went with Alexander Scriabin, which said the red, the intense red that we are seeing, should be in the note C. So without wasting more time, I'm also going to show that example, because after then I think they're going to cut me off. So let's go back to Unreal. And I'm just going to hope and pray that we're already switched to Unreal. And in Unreal Engine 5, we have this structure right now, which is an hell sound ambience. Like I don't need, we'd never call it sound ambience. I'm sorry. I'm babbling because we're running out of time. So to go through it very shortly. For example, this asset, which I think I got it from a Strata library, like a Boom library drone. This drone was originally in A, which is now being pitch shifted 2 notes up to not 2 notes, 2 semitones up. And more importantly, I'm using this envelope to make sure this pitch shift happens in 3 seconds, because basically it reaches the sustain level of 2, which adds 2 to the pitch shift, which if you're not into Unreal Engine meta sounds, I know this is too nerdy, but yeah, I'm telling the truth, I'm not lying. So, and I'm also doing the same thing for lava bubbling, which luckily for us already had a pitch of C. By the way, you can try, like if you're not hearing it yourself or if you cannot figure it out yourself, you can always also use on Reaper. Like Reaper has a sampler and other, like in the media bay, you can always try to see the pitch of a sound before you incorporate it into something. And last but not least, we have, like, this is a meta sound patch that I built. It's basically just picks a random sound from an array and plays it, and it's some mono samples. So these are all swords because we had swords on our reference image that are in F. So, and I'm pitch shifting this 4 semitones down, and also has a bicloud filter because meta sounds is that cool. So let's listen to it again, and this time only listen to pitch shift that is happening in time in the drone. You can also time the trigger of these samples, like one-shot samples. You can put minimum maximum time and randomly trigger this, and all of these values can be parameterized and triggered from blueprints. So I am going to go back to my presentation and hope I will not be cut off. So I think I'm going to have to, yeah, this was a very small, another example that I showed, another visual design example. These are all terrible looking logos, which are generated by AI. That's also why it's terrible for a bad guy. And you can also map these logos because guess what? People already done very similar things. This is like a graphic notation examples from the 90s, 70s, or 60s you can find. And last but not least, I cannot believe I left the most important one to the last minute. So we're probably not going to have the time for this. But of course, animation and interaction is one of the most important parts of game audio, and how to get them connected to each other. So I'm just going to talk.
2 minutes till Q&A. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So, all right, then I'm not going to show the Unreal Engine sample in this case, but I'm just going to give just the short summaries of this. Speed of your player, or velocity, anything. You can always map to pitch shifting, playback speeds, and musical or SFX tempo. Your SFX, your sound effects, your music always also have like a beat, unless on times that you don't want it to have it when it's a drone. But most often than not, you can match that to the speed of your player. Same with animation sync, rhythmic equivalence. For example, if you have a character that suddenly started to go limp, you can give them musical theme or like a rhythmic structure that is odd meter instead of even metered. So an acoustic impact, a signal mood, and this was my example with a door. You can use a door opening for so many things. And one of those things is to show a mood. If your character just get bad news or about to go into a fight, etc., you can open the door slowly. You can open the door faster. You can slam the door. You don't maybe close it because you're absent-minded. These are all things that you can put on it. And now I'm going to quickly go through it. Yeah, we're not doing this. Summary. We don't want to overwhelm our audience by signaling and encoding every single thing. Most important thing. You should not be go through the list that I just talked about and try to encode every single thing that you see. Like, it is important, like moderation in everything is important, and contrast is your friend. If everything has the same amount of importance, nothing is important. You have to pick and choose carefully what you want to have more detail or more importance. And this is one of the reasons you have your job. This is also your job to figure this out with the rest of your team. Number 3 is one of the things that always gets me job. Read the manual. Read the manual. Do the work. Be proactive. And more importantly, have fun. Always have fun. Thank you so much to everybody for giving me the time. And I'm sorry for running off. And I'm open to questions now. Thank you, everybody.